About the fire, we were at home and we got a telephone call, and so we went to the offices of Race Today, which were in Brixton, and we lived in Brixton at the time, and the phone just did not stop ringing. And as the news spread, and at that time, you have to understand the black community as it existed was much more of a cohesive community, particularly in Brixton, a very cohesive community, and in Peckham and in New Cross, a very cohesive black community. And so the grapevine just happened. People telephoning people saying, have you heard about this fire? And so we took the decision as an organisation that was producing a magazine, a political collective, that Darcus should go down to the area with somebody called John LaRose, who was in the Black Parents movement and who had founded one of the first black bookshops in Britain, New Beacon Books. So Darcus and John went down to the area. They met Mrs. Ruddock, who you saw there. And at that time, there was no question that people believed that this was a firebomb that had entered the house. One of the members of the collective, Jean Ambrose, lived in Peckham at the time, and she tells the story of getting on the bus, and when she gets on the bus, it is only young black people who were all going to 439 New Cross Road. And the whole of the kind of young people, everybody's just converging. And on the day after, they just sat in the road. It was just, that's what they did to show their feeling of what had happened. And so after that, there was a lot of discussion about what we should do. Alex Pascal, who was running Black Londoners at the time, with Juliet, who you saw there, was very, very, very active with a programme called Black Londoners. By then, the news has spread not only in London about this fire, but nationally. And so we had been political activists. I mean, for myself, by the time we get to 81, we've been kind of going at it through Black Power in 81, a good 10 years. We've been campaigning against police malpractice all the time, for decent education, for housing. We've been involved in strikes. So we were kind of new political activism, but all of us, and particularly John and Darcus, were very clear that they felt this moment was different. They felt the response of the way the community wanted to come together was different. And so we kind of knew, although of course hindsight's a wonderful thing, that kind of something was different about this moment. And that was proved because we decided to call a meeting in Lewisham around this. And at the first meeting, expecting normally as political activists, if you get 100 people in the meeting, you kind of, you've made it. But at this meeting, 300 people turned up. And people turned up from Nottingham, from Birmingham, from Manchester, because by now people were so concerned about what had happened that they had just all converged. It was a very riotous meeting, a very angry meeting. A lot of the young black men in that meeting were saying it's time to pick up the gun. We need to go and shoot these fascists. We're living in an era, I must say, unfortunately with Tommy Robinson, some might say we're returning to that era, but we're living in an era when there's a lot of right-wing racist activity locally. And so the young black men were saying, this talking has to stop. We need to arm ourselves. We need to, go and start shooting people. We were aware that the police were in the meeting. We knew Special Branch were in the meeting. We knew they were hearing all of this. And we took the decision that we would meet weekly and we would discuss what we should do as a community about the New Cross fire. And there were two kind of prongs to this. One was we had to look after the families and the children. So I visited the hospitals. Alex Pascal, through Black Londoners, was raising money to bury the children. We were talking to the parents all the time. So one of the focuses is the families. We must care for the families. That, outside of politics, these people have lost children. These are grieving people, family and friends. So what can we do to support them? And then on the other hand, there was, what are we going to do politically about this? And so this was the kind of atmosphere in which we were working in. I would go, in particular, I made friends with the two families, Sandra Ruddock, who was in the film, and the Gooding family. And I'm still friends with Mrs. Gooding today, who's now in her 90s. And she lost her son, Andrew, and one of our other sons was really badly burnt. And her daughter, Denise, who you saw, was one of the ones who jumped. And we would visit them, and when we would get there, we'd say, oh, it's good to see you. But, the police have just been here, and they've warned us. We mustn't get involved with you. You're making this political. We shouldn't get involved with you. And so the onslaught of the police, and I must say the church and other community leaders, community relations leaders, was to tell the parents that they were aware that this meetings was going on to discuss politically what we should do and to try and get the parents away from us, to say that they should be separated. And in that they were completely unsuccessful. You will see in Menelik's film, I'm sorry I came late, but the front of the march at the beginning is led by the parents. All the parents of the children are leading the march. So despite the efforts of the local state and the police to get them away from what they called the radical political people, who were us, they absolutely failed in that. And part of that was also our commitment to them, that it wasn't just a political issue for us, it was a community event that we had to show that we cared for them as well. So we were very successful in that. And then we would have these regular meetings, all different black organisations would attend, all sorts of decisions, what should we do, what should we do? And then in one of the meetings, a black worker from Ford's got up and he said, we need to have a black strike. We need to show this society that this has happened. None of the mainstream press really covered it, only the South East London Mercury. At that time, there'd been a disco fire in Liverpool. Mrs. Thatcher and the Queen had sent messages to the relatives of the children who died in the fire at Liverpool. No message to the New Cross families. And that basically the police, by now, were beginning to lay their theory that some young black boys in the party went upstairs, had a fight, and that caused the fire, even though, as you can see from them, they're all saying at the beginning that the fire started in the front room. So we were aware that all of that was going on. And this man got up and he said, we need a black strike. We need to show these people that black people in this country cannot put up with what we've been putting up with for, the decades that we've been here, since the major immigration, which is the 60s. We talk about Windrush in the 40s, but really mass immigration is in the 60s. And that's how the Black People's Day of Action came about. So the Black Strike morphed into the Black People's Day of Action. And why the Black People's Day of Action was different was, as you will know from demonstrations that are going on now about Palestine and everything, the tradition is that you march on a Saturday, you have your rally in Trafalgar Square, sometimes Hyde Park, and then everybody goes home. And we said, no, we will march on a Monday, and we will not do the tradition of Trafalgar Square, rally, go home. We will actually march through London, cross Blackfriars Bridge, which until like the 16th century, that was something that hadn't happened. We will march down Fleet Street to show the newspapers how angry we are with our slogan, 13 dead and nothing said. Fleet Street then was where all the newspapers were housed. It's now Wapping, but then it was Fleet Street.